President Trump is, of course, defending his July call with the president of Ukraine after the White House released a summarized transcript of their conversation earlier today. It shows the president asked his counterpart to look into former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter for work he did in Ukraine. Here's what President Trump said at a press conference in New York.
But also insist on transparency from Joe Biden and his son Hunter on the millions of dollars that have been quickly and easily taken out of Ukraine and China. Millions of dollars, millions and millions of dollars taken out very rapidly while he was vice president. And I think they should have transparency for that. I didn't threaten anybody. In fact, the press was asking questions of the president of Ukraine, and he said no pressure. I used the word pressure. I think he used the word push, but he meant pressure, but it's the same thing. No push, no pressure, no nothing.
Michael Isikoff is the chief investigative correspondent for Yahoo News. He covered President Bill Clinton's impeachment extensively. Michael, thank you so much for being with us. Before I get into your interpretation of the summary of their call, I want to ask you if you just heard what Adam Schiff there said. He's calling the DOJ, the Department of Justice, into question, saying that he finds it unbelievable that the DOJ intervened by not letting this whistleblower's complaint get to Congress. What do you make of that?
Well, we did see the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel, opinion from the Justice Department today. And I have to say that their description of the whistleblower's complaint was a lot less than we expected was in it, and a lot less than Adam Schiff is in the way Adam Schiff is describing it. The OLC said the complaint is about a campaign finance violation, that the whistleblower heard about the phone call, heard about the president's request to Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and deemed that a potential violation of campaign finance laws because the president was asking for, quote, a thing of value from a foreign entity, which would be illegal under federal election law. Now, if that's what it's about, that's a lot less than some of the reporting in recent weeks, the last week or so has been. So we don't know. The Justice Department may have been minimizing the complaint and not capturing the totality of it, or if it's just that, then I have to say the transcript of the phone call is a lot more damning for the president and the White House than this whistleblower's complaint. Well,
let's get into
as represented by the OLC.
Well, let's get into that then. What was your interpretation of the summary of their call? Because, I want to point out to our viewers, it is just a summry of the call, not a complete transcript.
It clearly confirms the worst, which is that the president did indeed request from the president of Ukraine for him to investigate his political rival, Joe Biden, or the son of Joe Biden, in a way to damage Joe Biden. So he does that. He says, I have a favor I want to ask of you, after they have a discussion about aid that the U.S. government can provide for Ukraine. Now, there's no explicit quid pro quo, but the mere fact that the president did actually make this request is pretty striking, and I think that's what it is that got everybody riled up, and that's why we are where we are in terms of impeachment.
And Adam Schiff also told reporters earlier today that he said he finds it shocking at another level that the White House would release these notes and somehow feel that this would help the president's cause. Is it also surprising to you on that level?
Yeah, although, there's an old adage that, get it out. If there's damaging stuff that you think is going to come out anyway, get it out and take your lumps quick and early in hopes that, the public will process it over time and you'll survive.
Right.
I mean, it may have been that. Or maybe they are so tone deaf to actually think that this was going to help them. It's hard to know with this White House.
So, Michael, Congress is scheduled to begin a 2-week recess on Friday. President Clinton's impeachment trial was during a lame duck Congress. So how does the timing of this impeachment inquiry affect what we may see happen next?
Well, we don't know, and Speaker Pelosi and Democratic leaders have not. It appears that they have not settled on how quickly they want to move, but I think they do risk losing the moment if they drag this out for too long. The shock value of the transcript is there today. The president had no good explanation for why he would make this bizarre request of the president of Ukraine, so, it may be that the strongest momentum for impeachment is right now. Mm-hmm. And if they, proceed through lengthy investigations and hearings, the public may this may get baked in. The public will just view it as just one more outrageous thing that President Trump has done. And by the time the House is ready to vote, the public could start shrugging their shoulders. So, we'll see how quickly they're going to move. The idea that the procedure that Pelosi outlined yesterday of having 6 committees continue their investigations and feed what they've got to the judiciary seems like an unwieldy process that will produce a lot of stuff that will not make it into an articles of impeachment that will actually have traction with the public. Right. This does. The Ukraine phone call does have traction with the public. That's why you had moderate Democrats getting behind it. Again, the Democrats could squander the opportunity if they try to rope in too many other things.
Michael, you studied, impeachment extensively. In modern history, Americans only remember 2 impeachment proceedings, Bill Clinton's and Richard Nixon's earlier.
There was another one, Andrew Johnson.
Right, but not in modern history. Not that,
right.
Living Americans remember.
Sure.
First off, how was Bill Clinton's proceeding different from Nixon's, and how will this one vary from those 2? It seems like each one has its own variations.
Right. Every case is different, and it's hard to generalize. But I would say that in all 3 previous cases of presidential impeachment, Andrew Johnson, Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, it always ended up being about some violation of federal law. The Constitution says high crimes and misdemeanors. That can be interpreted in many different ways, but it is the language of criminal law. So Andrew Johnson was about violation of the Tenure of Office Act. Richard Nixon, it was about obstruction of justice. Bill Clinton, it was about perjury. And obstruction as well. And by the way, Clinton got off, as did Andrew Johnson. Nixon was forced to resign. In this case with the Ukraine, Ukraine phone call, it is not clear that there is a violation of law by President Trump. It was an abuse of power in a larger sense that could be grounds for impeachment, but historically, impeachment has been about violations of law. Mm-hmm. So, this may not be as clean cut as the Democrats want it to be, but certainly, as I said, the shock value of seeing the president making this bizarre request is pretty powerful in its own right.
And Michael, as we mentioned earlier, this summary of President Trump's call is not a transcript, but based on notes and recollections from Situation Room duty officers. I want to ask you, during Watergate, the Nixon administration said instead of releasing tapes, it would create memos of the tapes. So can you remind us what happened there and why it's relevant today?
Actually, it's pretty funny because the initial offer from the Nixon White House in October of 1973 is they would provide a summary of the what was on the White House tapes, and then have John Stennis, a septuagenarian senator from Mississippi who was nearly deaf, listen to the tapes and authenticate them. That didn't fly. Archibald Cox, the special prosecutor, rejected it in a heartbeat, and Nixon fired Cox the next day, and that was the Saturday Night Massacre, and that set in motion the chain of events that led to his impeachment. So, having summaries really doesn't cut it. Having somebody, some other person authenticate it doesn't cut it. You got to see the evidence itself. I think the one step that the House Democrats clearly do have to take is to bring in those note takers, bring in the people that listen to the phone call, and ask them about the ellipses. You know, there are several passages where there are, conspicuous ellipses. So what was said in between those sentences that are not in the transcript.
Right, and questions about tone and pauses, all of that are very important when it comes to phone calls. Now, I'm just curious, though, how has the role and power of congressional oversight changed from the Watergate scandal until now?
Well, the difference is that Congress is so polarized that there's no bipartisan, no spirit of bipartisanship when it comes to investigations at all. So it makes holding hearings, it makes pursuing investigations all the more difficult because they are inevitably seen as partisan exercises. We saw it, during the Obama years with the Benghazi investigation, purely partisan by Republicans going after Hillary Clinton. And of course, from the Republicans' perspective, that's exactly what Democrats have been doing with the Mueller report and Russia matters. So, the fact that, look, the seminal moment in Watergate is when Barry Goldwater and other Republicans went to the White House and told them, you've lost public support, you have to resign.
Right.
Republicans were responding to the evidence.
And you think it's unlikely that would happen today?
Right now, we haven't seen it. We've seen one Republican senator, Mitt Romney, saying that what he's seen is troubling, but he wants to see more evidence. You saw, yesterday when Mitch McConnell allowed the Schumer resolution to pass unanimously calling for turning over the whistleblower complaint. That could have been a sign that Republicans were at least going through the motions or, wanting to put on a public face, that they wanted to see the evidence. We will see. The next few weeks will be very important. Quick
question, though, because we're running out of time, though. During Bill Clinton's impeachment proceedings, though, wasn't Congress as polarized as it is now?
Yes, you had, I think, 5 Democrats who voted for Clinton's impeachment, but certainly no Democrats in the Senate who voted to convict. So that the polarization has been increasing over the decades, but I think we're at a spot today where we've never been before.
All right. Well, Michael Isikoff, we thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Anytime.